Alright, we're just chock full of playing games today. Dutch Golden Age. I've been doing a real spate of Dutch games and from this era, etc. And this one is at fault for it. Not because I had it, but because it looked so damned interesting that it made me excited about some of the others that I recently picked up. I don't know if I've got them kicking around in view. Vak is one of them down there. Which is the Dutch East Indies Company. I did another one, Merchants of Amsterdam here. And of course, long ago, one of the first games I got into in my new gaming was Revolution, which is about the Dutch Revolt itself, less about the sailing. But this is kind of a neat one because it combines some aspect of a political type of game along with this sort of standard merchant type game. The rules are not terribly good, and I've looked for something that I know is in them and can't find it. I'm just going to talk through this. I ended up playing this with my wife, just 2 players, and it worked pretty well, 2 players. I could see where it would get better in more players. And one of the things that grabbed me about it was there were some really interesting kind of cool things that happen in the game. I can't talk too much about them because, well, I played a while ago and I don't remember it. But I remember being very impressed by some of the decisions that had to be made in the game, some of the choices, and some of the cool designs in it. And we kind of fudged one of the rules, the auction rule. It doesn't really work in 2, so we made negotiated sales as an alternative. So a little bit different from the base game, although you could play without auctions and still be playing kind of a pure non-wheeling dealing Euro. All right, let's dive in and look at what we got. First of all, we got the board, which has key provinces in the Netherlands. Got some orange dice. Little pawn, this is going to mark the time track. And you roll around and move, you roll dice and move on this, but it has very little effect. It just generates some random events on there. And the random events are basically income for the players. Nothing more exciting than that. So they can give you a little boost. You've got these are called movement tokens, and they're a precursor to getting influence tokens. Influence tokens can be placed in the main provinces. They can also be placed on guilds and then out in colonies as well. You've got a very limited counter mix, especially in a 2-player game where the whole board isn't going to get filled up, and you're often wishing, well, I often found myself thinking, geez, I'm not sure I have the best stuff to finish the game with. You also have these decks of cards, and we'll go into them individually, but they're basically things that you can do by triggering your influence. And you'll have to pay some money to get them as well. All right, let me move some of this crap out of the way so that I can open the rolls up and start explaining. Like I said, the rules aren't terribly clear or good. So for example, the thing that I couldn't find, and I know I saw it because we played this way, but maybe I imagined seeing it, although it's a very strange kind of thing that I can't see just imagining, was you play with your cards face up. I think you could play with them face down, but face up certainly works, and certain cards would have to be face up some of the times anyway. Oh, you also have money, and I've thrown it into the tray just to keep it out of people's hands to make things easier. At the beginning of the game, everybody places one influence marker in a territory, and then each player is going to be dropping 2 of these movement tokens into a province, and they can't go where there's an influence marker, and there can never be more than 2 movement tokens in a single area. And then and that starts with the first player. First he places an influence, everybody else does, then he places his movement, everybody else does. And then the last person in order is going to get to place this anywhere he likes on the board. That can be affected quite strongly by the territory he's got his influence in, or movement markers. So then the basic sequence of play is you roll these dice. The steward moves forward that many spaces. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that thing's triggered. Now, if it's a couple of flags, what it triggers is a payout to the players who have influence and movement tokens there. You get 2 points for an influence token, and there can only be one in each area. And they don't never move once they're in territories. And you get 1 for each movement token, which do move, hence the name. If you land on one of these merchants here, I think everybody gets 1 guilder? Yeah. And if you land on William III, everybody gets 3 guilders. So these are just mainly an income generation factor. However, in addition to that income, some of these gray cards contain governors who will bring in an additional income, that extra 1 there, if the place is landed on. All right. Then you're allowed to do stuff on your turn. That's pretty specific, isn't it? Yeah, you pretty much can mix up and do whatever you like in whatever order you like. There are some things you can do as many times as you like. Moving one of your movement tokens. It costs you a half a guilder to do that, and you can do several of them at once or whatever, as long as you pay for them. Buying control of a guild. You pay the price here, which at the beginning of the game would be 3 each. But if somebody already has the 3 marker, well, it would cost you 4 to buy the guild, and they go away. And you're now in this space. The next person costs 5, and so on. And I guess if you reach the 10 spot, you are immune from losing it. That's a lot of money to pay for a guild. You could also place a new influence marker. If you happen to have 3 of these movement markers in one place, you can scoop them all up and drop an influence marker into that location, assuming no one else has an influence marker there. So that's kind of how you get control of new areas, is using these movement markers. I'll explain how you win in a little while, but it's a combination of money and board presence. And first person who reaches 33 points and notices it declares they win, and they win. All right, in addition to those, you can do special actions, and this is why you have influence markers. If you have an influence marker in an area, it produces a certain type of action. So this produces a yellow action, which essentially means you get to buy one of these yellow cards. Green action, well, there's no green card, but that allows, most of the others are cards, the blue, gray, purple, and even this, which is an action off there, are cards. The green is something special that allows you to buy a movement token. We'll get to the costs and such, not with that. But those, whenever you trigger them, you flip the token over. If you control a guild, you have the same ability. You can flip a token over and use that color action. So that's kind of why you have the guilds, right? Guilds have no value other than that, whereas these tokens here have a victory point value as well, and also a taxation value when they come up. You may also conduct auctions. If you have an influence marker on the main board in the Netherlands, not in a guild, not in the New World, and yet you have these guys here too, however you want to represent them, you can offer its ability up for auction. And all the other players bid increments of a half guilder. It actually goes sequentially, clockwise, whatever, all very orderly. So who you sit next to could have some influence here. And whoever bids the highest pays you that money and gets to take the action without paying for the action. So you're basically selling the services maybe for less than you could buy them for, as we'll see with the different services. So what are those special actions you can do? The green action is for 5 guilders and flipping over a green action, so you have a limit, an obvious limit. These aren't free actions in the sense that you can do them as much as you like. You flip over the token, you spend 5 guilders, and you get to put a movement thing, I think, anywhere. Yeah. And if you happen to put it where you already have 2 of these, and there's no influence there, you can scoop them up immediately. Remember, that's a free action. There's no... Basically, you can always mix things up and do additional things, whatever. The yellow action, the bonus there, is you get to buy a card. Now, buying cards always costs you, except for the New World, 3 guilders. And you buy one of these, and what these are all the same, really. They show a picture. Yeah, that's not. They show a picture, and it's going to be one of these 3 pictures. And then a set collection requirement. So for this one, you'd have to get 3 of a kind, and once you do, they get turned in, and you get 20 guilders for it. And remember, it's going to cost you 9 guilders to buy it, right? This one, just drawing the card gets you 5 guilders, and the card gets discarded. It could be reshuffled later if need be. This one, you need a pair of pairs, or a pair of chicks, and you get 12. That's the advantage of that. They produce money for you. The brown actions, these are the least valuable at the early part of the game because they don't produce you money. The way this works is when you draw one of these, you've commissioned a painter. And that painter will give you a certain number of victory points if you spend a certain amount of money. Oh, well, that sounds easy. Yeah, not quite. You can only spend the money. First of all, it costs you, I think, 3 to buy a brown card, right? Let's make sure. Yeah, 3 guilders to pick a brown card, and then once you have one, you spend additional brown actions to spend 1 guilder at a time for each brown action to commission the artwork. So with this, I'd have to draw the card, have it in front of me, and then spend another brown action. I spent 1 to draw the card. I'd spend another 1 to pick this up, to activate this, and to essentially make change, pay that painter a guilder. Once his money is reached, and I could choose to pay this one with the brown action instead. Once that total amount of money is reached, he's been scored, and now you have that many victory points. And the more they cost, the more victory points they're going to give you. Those are kind of hard to pick early in the game, and for good reason, because, well, they're not going to help your economic engine. Some of this other stuff helps your engine nicely. So, for example, the yellow cards, hey, they give me cash right away. Cash is good. The blue actions. The blue actions come in 3 kinds, basically. Cannons, boats, and dudes. And yeah, I see these flags. Once you have 1 of each of these, you get to take an influence marker and put it out in the New World. You have 2 choices in the New World. You can either put it over on this side of things, which is the East Indies, and each of these spaces only holds 1 influence marker. Or you can put it over here, and that'll hold as many influence markers as need be. In terms of victory points, these are the values. If it's on this side, it's only worth 5 victory points. If it's on this side, it's worth 6. But here's the point. Your influence marker there can trigger something as well. When you flip it over and pay your $3, you get one of these cards. These cards are just like the yellow cards that produce money on pairings, but they produce better money. They're good deals. To flip a card from here, though, costs you 2, not 3. Here it's 3, 4, 5, 6. Over here it costs you 7 to draw one of those cards. So those cards have a higher investment ratio. They're gonna, while they pay off more, if you get the early East Indies ones, you get a very good payoff compared to how much you're paying for the card. But if you're going with the West Indies, you may be kind of breaking even in terms of comparing it to what you can make off the yellow cards. Of course, you have that big 6 victory points for each token in there, which is nice. Now, you're limited to how many of these influence markers you can have. Once you put here and once you put here, you can't remove from the map. If you've got one on a guild, if you're the person who bought the highest guild and you need an influence marker for something else, you can strip it off and you've just made that guild a lot cheaper to take control of and use it on the board for some other purpose. Okay, so that's why you have the blue cards. We already did the tan cards. They're kind of explained. One thing we didn't explain with the blue cards is they're wild cards. They can be used to substitute for any of the 3 types that you need. We got one more card type left. The gray. Gray are weird. First of all, they have governors. Governors are pretty cool. You turn one up, that gives you a victory point. And anytime that location is landed on by the pawn, you get an extra money. Not something to really count on as fueling your money. You also got some of these yellow cards stuck in there. Weird. Yep, they count just like yellow cards. You got some boat cards in there. You're basically going with a more random solution. And then there's these, which are just victory point cards. They give you some victory points. There's these guys, which say, hey, you didn't like a die roll? Now, that's just moving this. You toss this away and you get to re-roll the dice. I'm sorry, I lied. You toss that away and you get to decide what number is rolled on the dice. So you can ensure that you get, you don't have, it's done before the roll is done. So you can ensure that you get the die roll you want and land on the space that helps you the most in the near future. Okay. So that's actually pretty much it. All we have to do is figure out, hey, how does the game end? The game ends when somebody hits 33 victory points. Well, what are victory points? Let's get the full edition because we've seen some things that give them. Okay, each of your movement tokens in a province is worth 1. Each influence token in a province is worth 4. And then we have these prices 5 and 6. The arts cards that you finish, they're worth what they're worth finished. That ranges from 3 to 8. The gray cards that give victory points and that's it are worth 2 each. The governors are worth 1 each. And then every 10 guilders you have in cash in front of you, not on an arts card, not in the bank, not in somebody else's hand. No, for every 10 you have, you get 1 victory point. Your goal is 33 points. Once you reach that, you win. Interesting competitions happen in this game, though, over control. It's sort of long-term control. So errors you make early on in your investment choices can cost you heavily. For example, let's say you started off with an influence in the art area. That seems like a very bad choice because that's not going to improve anything. It's just going to be banking victory points throughout the entire game. There are only 4 players and there are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 provinces. You're not guaranteed to get the color you like. There's only 2 of each color. And I think yellow is probably the best because it gives you cash right away that you can start funneling. You can start turning that cash over and turn it into other things. Is it a dominating factor, though? Well, somebody can use cash to buy the guild, but that, becomes sort of an auction as people slowly keep paying more and more. Other options, gray is sort of a neat secondary option because it says, well, I can get some yellow cards and maybe I can buy yellow cards at auction if somebody's willing to put them up for auction. That's kind of unlikely. The blues are another option because they allow you to go out here. I do have some worry that the yellows may just dominate and that if you get a yellow early in the game, and 2 people are going to grab them, right? If you get a yellow early in the game, you're just going to be able to outstrip what everyone else has as a value. That's my worry with it. But there is something kind of cool about how it all operates. And maybe it's just better in 2. With, throw away the auction rule, go to the agreed upon sales or whatever. All right, let's load this up and we'll see how it works in an actual amount of players it's supposed to support. Because one thing is, see, if you've got the yellows, that's good and fine, but the blues get you an early entry into here, and these are better than the yellows. So right there, there's 4 things that look interesting. What about the greens? Well, it's a high investment cost, but you already have 2 units. For $5, you could grab another colored area with greens. And then you're ahead of everybody in terms of your position. So I think there's some value to all of them, and even if you get cut out of any of these, you do have the ability to play over here in the guild chart until the price goes up to 10, I guess. All right, up it goes.